Hello, my name's Bryan Atkinson and welcome to UK Aircraft Explored. In this video we shall cover the Avro Lancaster's emergency equipment and procedures. We shall look at the emergency operations a Lancaster bomber crew would need to know before embarking on an operation. We shall be referring to the wartime 1943 Air Ministry manuals that were used by air crews at the time. I hope you find this interesting. If an engine failure occurs during takeoff and for any reason the booster pumps in the fuel tanks being used are not on, the master fuel cock of the failed engine must be turned off before feathering. If one outer engine fails, the aircraft can be kept straight provided 130 miles an hour has been reached. Climbing speed on 3 engines should be 135 miles an hour at moderate loads, or 140 miles an hour if heavily loaded. As soon as the undercarriage is up, raise the flaps a little at a time, re-trimming as necessary. If engine failure occurs during flight and an engine is stopped, air may be drawn into the fuel system through the carburettor of the failed engine. To prevent this, the master fuel cock must be turned off before feathering, unless the booster pump for the tank in use is on. If an engine seizes up, its master fuel cock should be turned off immediately to ensure that the fuel supply to the other engine on the same side is not affected. If the failed engine cannot be made to pick up again, feather its propeller and switch off. On Lancaster 3 and 10 aircraft, set mixture control to idle cut-off. When handling on 3 engines, the aircraft will maintain height at full load on any 3 engines at 10,000 feet and can be trimmed to fly without foot load. Maintain at least 145 miles an hour. The automatic pilot has sufficient power to maintain a straight course with either outboard engine out of action, but only if assisted by the rudder trimming tab. When landing on 3 engines, lowering of flaps to 20 degrees and lowering the undercarriage may be carried out as normal on the airfield circuit, but further lowering of the flaps should be left until final straight approach. The final approach should be made at 120 to 125 miles an hour, using as little power as possible, and rudder trim should not be wound off until definitely committed to landing. Use all good engines to regulate approach. When handling on 2 engines, it should be possible to maintain height below 10,000 feet at 140 miles an hour on any 2 engines after release of bombs and with half fuel used. But with 2 engines dead on one side, the foot load will be very heavy. The automatic pilot will not cope with flight with 2 engines dead on one side. When landing on 2 engines, the circuit should be made with the good engines on the inside of the turn, and undercarriage and flaps usage left as late as possible. Keep extra height in hand if possible and lower the undercarriage later than usual, but have it locked down just before the final approach. The approach should be made at 130 to 135 miles an hour in a glide. When certain of getting into the airfield, lower the flaps for landing. Do not wind off trim until final approach can be made in a glide, as some power may be necessary in the early stages. It is important not to attempt to maintain height above 10,000 feet, either on 3 or 2 engines. With regard to the fuel system, the cross-feed cock should only be turned on when it is desired to feed fuel from port or starboard tanks to starboard or port engines. In this case, all live engines should be fed from one tank and the fuel booster pump for this tank should be on. The fuel selector for the tanks on the other side of the aircraft should be off. At all other times, the cross-feed cock should be off. When practicing feathering the propeller, check that the booster pump in the tank feeding the engine to be stopped is on. Set propeller control to low revs per minute and throttle to give a moderate cruising boost. When undertaking an emergency feathering of the propeller, if possible, the master fuel cock should be turned off immediately before feathering, but if this is not possible, turn the fuel cock off immediately after feathering. Hold the required feathering button in only long enough to ensure that it stays in by itself, then release it so that it can spring out when feathering is complete. Then close the throttle. On Lancaster 3 and 10 aircraft, move the slow running cutout switch to idle cut-off position. Switch off only when the engine has stopped. It's important to realise which engine auxiliaries will be affected by feathering. They are as follows: port outer, alternator for special radio, and the rear turret hydraulic pump. Port inner, generator, main services hydraulic pump, the mid-lower turret hydraulic pump, RAE compressor for the automatic pilot Mk.IV, and computer unit for Mk.XIV bomb sight, and the number 1 vacuum pump. Starboard inner, generator, main services hydraulic pump, front turret hydraulic pump, the Hayward compressor for pneumatic system, and number 2 vacuum pump. Starboard outer, alternator for special radio, and the mid-upper turret hydraulic pump. When unfeathering a propeller, it is preferable not to unfeather at speeds above normal cruising speed to avoid any risk of overspeeding. First set the throttle closed or slightly open, with the propeller control fully down and ignition on. Switch on the fuel booster pump of the fuel tank in use and turn on the master engine cock. Hold the starter button in, and on Lancaster 3 and 10 aircraft, as the engine starts turning, set the slow running cutout switch to running, that's the up position. Continue to hold the button in until it reaches at least 1,500 revs per minute, and not more than 1,800 revs per minute. If the propeller does not return to normal constant speed operation, open the throttle slightly. If a fire occurs in the bomb bay, the pilot should open the bomb doors, jettison the bombs and dive. If the aircraft is damaged, the flight engineer should check the fuel contents gauges. Should any abnormal consumptions be shown on the tank the aircraft is running on, or should any of the other tanks show a loss of fuel, proceed as follows. Set crossfeed cock to on. Run all engines on the damaged tank and switch on its booster pump. The fuel selector for the tanks on the other side of the aircraft should be off. When the contents of the damaged fuel tank falls to 20 gallons, turn on the fuel selector for the corresponding tank on the other side of the aircraft and turn off the crossfeed valve. Watch the fuel pressure warning lights or the fuel pressure gauge and change over to the other tank as soon as pressure drops. Switch off the booster pump in the empty tank. Undercarriage emergency operation is carried out as follows. If the hydraulic system fails, the undercarriage can be lowered by compressed air from a special bottle or bottles, irrespective of the position of the undercarriage lever. It should be noted that the flap selector lever should be neutral before using the undercarriage emergency air system. On early Lancaster aircraft, the control is just after the front spar, but on later aircraft, the knob for working the air system is just forward of the flight engineer's instrument panel. The undercarriage cannot be raised again by this method. Although the undercarriage will lower by this method, irrespective of the position of the normal undercarriage selector, the latter should be left in the down position fore and after landing. Otherwise, any leakage of air pressure may cause the undercarriage locks to be released and the undercarriage to collapse. When flaps emergency operation is required, after lowering the undercarriage by turning on the emergency aircock, the flaps may be lowered by operating the flaps control, which admits the air pressure to the flap system. The flaps may be raised again, but there may not be sufficient air pressure to lower the flaps a second time. Furthermore, it may cause the header tank to burst. If it is absolutely necessary to raise the flaps by emergency method, extreme care must be taken to raise them slowly by stages. If the flaps are lowered by the emergency method before landing, flaps must be left down after landing, owing to the likelihood of bursting the header tank. On aircraft in which Mod 757 is incorporated, the bomb doors can be operated in an emergency by compressed air from an air bottle. It's entirely separate from the undercarriage and flaps emergency air bottle. If when the pilot selects bomb doors open or closed, the doors fail to operate, the air bomber should withdraw the pin on the emergency air control in the nose and hold the control down against the spring. When the doors have fully opened or closed, the air bomber should release the control. There is sufficient pressure in the air bottle for 3 or 4 operations. When bomb jettisoning, open the bomb doors and check visually that both are fully open. Then jettison the containers first by the switch on the right side of the instrument panel. Then jettison the bombs by handle beside the container jettison switch. Now close the bomb doors. When fuel jettisoning, only contents from the number 1 tanks can be jettisoned. While jettisoning, reduce speed to 150 miles an hour and lower the flaps to 15 degrees. Lift and turn the jettison control on the left of the pilot's seat, ensuring to return control after jettisoning. The jettison valve should be closed while there is still about 100 gallons remaining in each tank. If the jettison valve is left open, all the fuel will be jettisoned, less approximately 70 gallons, but the last 30 gallons of jettisonable fuel runs out slowly and is inclined to get splashed over the fuselage. The jettison valve may be closed at any time during jettisoning. Approximate weight of jettisonable fuel, leaving 100 gallons in each tank, is around 6,900 pounds. For parachute exit, the hatch in the floor of the nose should be used by all members of the crew if time is available. It is released by using the handle in the centre, lifting inwards and jettisoned. The main entrance door should be used as a parachute exit only in extreme emergency. The Lancaster has 3 push-out panel crash exits that are fitted in the roof. One above the pilot, one just forward of the rear spar, and one forward of the mid-upper turret. For ditching purposes, a Type J dinghy is stowed in the starboard wing and may be released and inflated using the following methods. From inside the aircraft, by pulling the release cord running along the fuselage roof after the rear spar. From outside the aircraft, by pulling the loop on the starboard side, just rear of the tailplane leading edge. Or automatically by an immersion switch. When ditching the aircraft, the flaps should be lowered to 30 degrees, but if the flaps will not lower by using the hydraulic system, do not attempt to lower them by the compressed air system, as this will also cause the undercarriage to lower. Each engine is provided with a fire extinguisher bottle, which can be operated by push buttons on the pilot's instrument panel. The fire extinguishers are also operated automatically by a crash switch mounted on the starboard side of the nose, and when the undercarriage is down, by a gravity switch, also fitted to the starboard side of the nose. There are no automatic flame switches fitted, therefore in flight the operation of the engine fire extinguishers is left entirely to the pilot's discretion. Graviner hand fire extinguishers are provided for the crew at the following positions: one on the port side of the air bomber's compartment, one on the port side of the pilot's seat, one on the starboard side aft of the rear spar, one on the starboard side forward of the mid-upper turret, and one at the rear turret. A signal pistol is stowed on top of the front spar. The firing position is in the roof forward of the stowed position. Signal cartridges are stowed on the starboard side of the fuselage, just forward of the front spar. The crew's parachutes are stowed as follows: one in the air bomber's compartment on the aft bulkhead, one behind the pilot's seat, one on the starboard wall at the rest station, one on the starboard wall forward of the mid-upper turret, one on the port side opposite the entrance door, and one stowed forward of the rear turret. Here are the instructions for using the static line for parachuting wounded men. If possible, fly the aircraft at 130 miles an hour with 15-degree flap. Assist casualty to the air bomber's compartment and place him feet first facing aft. Check the casualty's parachute harness, fit the parachute and remove his flying helmet. Remove the static line from the stowage, which is situated on the starboard side of the front exit. Care should be taken that the threads keeping the static line folded up are not broken. Take the snap hook at the end of the static line and attach to the parachute. Stow the slack of the static line between the becket and snap hook under the adjacent pack elastic to prevent this slack length getting caught up on anything and thus pulling the ripcord too soon. Then open and jettison the front hatch. Slide the man through the exit feet first facing aft. Care must be taken to keep his hands to his sides. Do not hold on the static line by hand. Emergency packs are provided on the starboard side of the rest station. A projectable kite container is also stowed along the port side of the rest station. Crash axes are stowed, one on the port side of the fuselage after the main entrance door, and one on the starboard wall in front of the rear spar. 2 incendiary bombs are provided on the front face of the front spar for the destruction of the aircraft after crashing. First aid equipment is stowed on the starboard side of the fuselage just after the main entrance door. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you like what I do on this channel, please click the like button and consider subscribing, and also click the bell. Remember, it's free and you'll receive notification when my future videos are posted. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.